So welcome everybody to another series, Spotlight series, highlighting transformational leaders, discussions on challenges and outcomes in today's digital transformation. And today we're going to be talking about the impact of coaching towards high performance teams. On behalf of DASA, I am your DASA DevOps Agile Skills Association. I'm your host today, Katrina Loki, and I am I work with community engagement. I interview leaders in IT, and I'm also a podcast host. So today we're going to be talking about how coaches deliver tremendous impact inside organizations, and their role, is more relevant and important for business outcomes than ever before. And, obviously this is our fifth session of the Spotlight series, where we do spotlight transformational leaders and highlight and today we're going to highlight the conversation again on the impact of coaching, as I mentioned earlier. So we'll cover relevant experiences from two of our very wonderful guests today, who I'm going to introduce to you in a minute. Before that, I'm going to sort of explain about DASA, the organization. This session is being recorded, and also any questions, we would love to hear them, and we will be answering them throughout this session. So please do post your questions in the chat, and we will answer those as we go along. So DASA is the world's largest DevOps and Agile association, fostering dialogue, debate, and collaboration amongst leading industries, professionals, and organizations. With a network of 300 partner organizations, DASA helps define, inform, and advance the DevOps industry through networking, information sharing, awards, and lifelong learning, as well as certification. And why coaching is part of it is because we also offer training in coaching, which Marion will be, who will represent that today, as he has taken the DASA coaching certification. So look forward to hearing about that. DASA was founded in 2016 with over 300 partners in 48 countries, with over 10,000 professionals. It's mainly made up of 4 pillars, and our pillars are guidance, which we do this, we basically, by offering access to guidance materials that are created by the various working groups that we have in place. These are aimed to help organizations refine their transformation journeys by learning from the successes of peers and the collective knowledge of experts. These are in the form of best practices and DevOps maturity assessments, scans, and guidance papers. And then communities are a powerful way to advance the movement of DevOps. The DASA communities are designed to share new ideas, practical suggestions, insights, and lessons learned. And we have a number of communities at the moment. One example, the Enterprise Leadership Forum, and we do monthly webinars where we talk about topics related to transformation and bring in leaders from different sectors. And we actually will be doing one next week on the 29th of September. I will share more details at the end. So, and also we continue to expand on these with the coaching community in the near future. DASA has created a new education hub that contains a range of talent management resources designed to create a continuous learning culture for members, and helps to map your team's exact needs to optimize their development. We are offering organizations building blocks to manage their own skill development program with a focus on talent transformation, people readiness, and competence building. And we will go into more detail. Obviously, you can learn more about this in other webinars that we organize. And then the final area we look at is recognition and visibility, helping organizations to celebrate their successes and advancements via awards, and helping organizations build employer branding to attract the right talent. So today we're going to be talking about coaching. And with us today, I'm going to introduce Marian Dragunov, who is an agile coach at T-Systems Iberia. And Marian, you're an agile DevOps consultant, a coach and facilitator with a deep passion for building people-centric teams and organizations. So, and you also are an ambassador for DASA. So welcome, Marian.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Hello, Katrina. Hello, Eileen.
Hey.
And Eileen Badar, also, who is an executive coach and brand consultant. And Eileen, you've had a lot of experience with C-suite clients, and you create impact for leaders by developing influence. And, you're also, a brand advisor. So just a little bit before we go into the discussion, just explain how you both got into coaching. So Marian, do you want to start? And then we'll hear from Eileen.
Of course, sure. I started a few years ago when I realized that we need agile coaches in our team. So we were at the brink of starting an agile transformation, and we realized, well, we need a few Scrum Masters and a few agile coaches. And I was fascinated by a few former colleagues of mine. So I thought, wow, that's great. That's something I would like to consider. And now, fast forwarding, a few years later, I discovered that this is my ikigai, as they call it. So there is a very nice book that describes the ikigai concept. So that's something that the world needs, right? That you can be paid for, something that's your personal mission and your personal passion. So yeah, it's basically a combination of all this. It's something I love to do, and also something that's contributing to companies and organizations nowadays.
Great. So yes, we'll hear why it's so important, coaching today in a bit. And Eileen, let's talk about your experience with coaching and how you got into coaching.
Sure. Yeah. I come from public relations and reputation management background. So in PR, you're trying to develop a public perception of someone or a business, a brand of a business. And when I was directly working with developing, CEO or C-suite public profiles for the individual, I started to ask questions in terms of what's their story, who are they, what do they stand for, what are their values, what is it that makes them unique, so that we can create a strategy for their public profile. And that naturally got me into coaching. I actually did not realize I was coaching, but through my clients, they were asking me, "Oh, you're a coach," and so I started to discover what the coaching industry is about. I hired a coach to coach me, and I realized that you really get to the depth of the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, whether you're a business or whether you're an individual. And it just sort of really rather just became natural, progression in my career. I got certified in 2 different types of coaching. And I find, I share that with you, Marian, about the Ikigai, really trying to understand and figure out, the alignment of who you are as an individual and what's your why and what's your purpose, and operating from that space to help the other, individuals. And I will say that, in a leadership position, particularly in the business context, knowing who you are, is really, really important. So it just became something that was very natural to me and has so much meaning. So it's great to be part of the coaching industry.
Wonderful. Well, it's very much a growing industry, So why has coaching become so important recently? And, obviously the last 10 years, I say recently, but, inside companies, why do you think it's so important? Marian, do you want to sort of give your view on this, and then Eileen?
Sure. Let's talk about results and data first, right? So I sometimes experience that the coaching role is taken as something very abstract. So let's bring in some numbers in the game, in the talk. On a strategic level, what do we aim for? Well, agility, both agility and DevOps culture is about customer satisfaction and also more efficiency. So if we do coaching right in these fields, we aim for up to 30% of increase in both, according to recent reports. And the third one on a strategic level is also crucial, and that's one of DASA's mandates: employee engagement or commitment, or simply happiness in the office and employee well-being. And this is something Agile and DevOps bring on the table. And then another aspect is apart from the strategic level, right? What do we bring on a day-to-day basis? And for that, I had a look at the Agile coaching report. So what the Agile coaches themselves report, why we consider ourselves relevant. And most of them marked mindset and culture shift, along with improvements in delivery and performance. And that leads me to your question: why is mindset and culture so important these days? Because we have to react quickly, right? We have the famous VUCA environment: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we are required to act quickly. We are required to adapt, both by the market and by our customers. They come from a fast-paced moving consumer industries, and in order to move quickly, we need to adapt. And in order to adapt quickly, this is a certain type of mindset, and it also requires a certain type of culture. And this is one of the main ambitions we have as Agile and DevOps coaches.
Eileen, why do you feel, from your perspective?
Yeah, I love that you started, the answer, Marion, with results, because I think, why do we look to do something different is when something is not working. So you have businesses that are not producing the results that they want to produce. And so they start to look at different avenues of what can I do differently. And coaching is a relevant, solution to the problem of today. You hear in the news a lot today, specifically about quiet quitting, or psychological safety, or corporate culture. These are not terms that we were used to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This is sort of when coaching started to become really relevant, because there's a problem that the hierarchical system and the authoritative system is no longer fixing. And so, companies and leaders are looking at different ways of fixing the solution. And so coaching comes in to, at the very basis, is to help the individual listen to the other, acknowledge the other person, create that culture that Marion is talking about, create that individual mindset that helps you come to the work day with as much as a healthy mindset as possible, so that you can move the vision towards the result. That's what I would say about why coaching has become so relevant.
Okay, great. And obviously, there are challenges. everybody's busy working, and they don't actually, sort of reflect on their sort of work style, and they're busy, with the particularly with IT and developers. They're focused on the job and not on how they communicate, for example. So what would you say are the challenges we see, particularly in digital transformation? Marion, you could probably sort of give some insight that, you've worked with clients in digital transformation. What are the challenges you see on a sort of personal level?
It's a long list. I would start with what's most visible. Obsolete technology that has been there historically, certain kind of infrastructure, certain kind of front-end platform that has been accepted, worked for years, maybe even for 25 years, and that's something very robust, very solid, very monolithic to change, right? This is one of the first thing when you enter IT, and then you see some of the challenges, and link to that, and also link with culture, long projects that have a fixed scope, a fixed duration, and a fixed budget, which allow for a very few, as they are called classically, change requests. So this is something else in terms of challenges, right? Lack of adaptation. And thinking about that, we also see very classic organizational structure in a lot of companies I've worked with. Structures that are created on mindset, on theories, on books back from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Very hierarchical, very functionality driven. So that worked back in the day, right? So when we say today silo, we put a bit of a negative connotation, but that worked for decades, right? The functionality department. And also linked to that, we see complex processes. So adding steps, right? So adding stakeholders, adding approvers, adding collaborators to a process organically, historically, until I've literally had cases where no one in the company could have managed the process, a critical process, right? So no one had the complete end-to-end view, and also what we consider as a DASA principle, end-to-end responsibility. So these are a few of the challenges that I think I can think on from the top of my head. I'm sure that the list can go on and on, but if we tackle at least these with coaching, I think we can congratulate ourselves for the win.
Mm-hmm. And Arlene, obviously, you talk about you know, in terms of UC teams, or working in. We talk about it also in digital transformation, but working in silos. Mm-hmm. How do you sort of overcome that challenge in terms of getting people to work together and work as a team, or getting I mean, you sort of mainly work with leaders of teams, but how do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, no, I mean, I also work with how do you get people to communicate together. And I think the first step is to try to remember, where does the idea that people are working on come from? And the idea is always coming from the individual, the person, the people, that, work together, have to work together. And so really reminding, the leadership, the culture, the manager of the team, that there are people that are working to get the idea forward. It's not so much about how smart of an idea you have or how innovative of a solution that you have, but it's how do you actually move it forward? And you move it forward through people. So if you're not engaging in better communication skills, in listening skills, in creating a culture that is agile, that works together to be flexible, to move around the problems, you're really missing the point. It's really people that carry the idea forward. That's why coaching is really important, because it reminds the business of the humanity, that is delivering the solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And obviously, getting each and every one to take responsibility and become leaders themselves.
But you can't do that without coaching. You can't tell somebody to be responsible. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of the authoritative way of leading is, well, you have certain title, you do that, or you report into me, you do that. You have a deadline, do that. I think, there are a lot of us that do that. We have a paycheck, we go to work, we get a paycheck, and then we move along with our lives. Where it actually works and thrives, as far as the company, the person, and the customer, is when the individual is getting coached on how to listen, how to communicate, how to, be empowered in driving solutions forward, in identifying the problems before they happen. That's why coaching is really important, because you've got to support the human being that's delivering on the idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's understanding the person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's basically where they're coming from on a personal level. and
Well,
also,
if
yeah.
I may add, I think Aline, you mentioned an important aspect. Apart from that, also empowerment, right? Ownership. So give the freedom to experiment towards a certain hypothesis that may benefit. I remember one of my mentors. I hope, Jerry, you're listening. I remember your advice. You should empower. You should give freedom as long as up to the point until you feel comfortable. So it's so much you empower your team in a controlled way, in a guided way, so much until you say, well, maybe I've crossed the line, and then you can stop.
That's great advice.
Yeah, great advice. So, yeah, so, I also want to talk about, in particular, sort of DevOps, obviously, because Maren coming from that background. And obviously, how does coaching work with DevOps teams, for example, implementing the right concepts and principles? And then, how do we relate those to our DASA principles, which you mentioned earlier, Maren? You mentioned a little bit about the 6 core principles, which I will cover, which are customer-centric action, create with the end in mind, end-to-end responsibility, cross-functional autonomous teams, continuous improvement, and more automate everything. So how do we bring those into, implementing the right concepts and principles? How do we bring those into developing teams?
Right. I think what I really like about DASA is that DASA gives me a very clear structure on what to follow, right? So first we have the dimensions, the culture, organization, processes, and automation, and then we have also the principles. So that's my North Star when I think of coaching to DevOps, right? And then if I want to deep dive, DASA also give in the courses and also to structured content a lot of detailed practices, and I can use that as a template, or I don't have to. But what really helps me is to think which principles to apply when, right? So depends on the maturity of the team, depends on the product, their vision, the environment there are. So we still have the 4 layers. So the culture, organization, processes, and automation. What to apply when to digest it for the teams. I haven't had the chance to apply all 6 at once. I think this is going to be very stressful for the team.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe something that I've learned through the last few years. And by the way, a side comment: my trainer from the DevOps coaching course is listening to me. Dimitri, I'm glad to have you here. It's a bit of a no pressure point to having to tell you how I implemented the theory into practice. But back to my point. I've learned that the principles are very disruptive. So they sound very, very intuitive, right? Customer-centric action. I think every self-respected company these days have it in their principles. But what does that really mean in practice? Well, interact with the customer, put them in the center. So not the process, not the manager, maybe not even the financial aspect, but the customer, or for example, they automate everything you can, right? We talk a lot about automation, but once you start digging into that, it may imply a huge change in infrastructure, for example, right? These obsolete technologies I mentioned, these old servers who have they've been there for years, for decades, right? How do I change that? How do I make the switch to cloud? Do I go for a hybrid cloud or a public one? What's my strategy? So bottom line again, think which principles to apply when and what step of these principles, right? So think about the maturity of your team. Either there are various models, right? And in the coaching course, we talked about Tuckman's models, right? There are also other frameworks for team maturity. I would recommend, there is a saying I really like: learn the rules like a pro to be able to break them like an artist. So my learning here was learn the basics from, in my case, it was Daza. And then once you've mastered the basics, you're able to go above and beyond in crafting something else.
Okay, adapting in other ways, and why is feedback so important also along the journey, Eileen? I mean, obviously you talk about, you know, feedback is very important along the journey. So just explain why that is.
Well, I think just the basis of what is feedback is to gather information, to try to understand. You know, you might develop a product and serve it to the customer, but if you don't know whether the customer likes it or not, then you know you might be losing the entire strategy. So I think in the same way with leadership, or you know, working within team, asking for feedback is really important information. It also relieves assumptions, right? Like really asking for clarity really relieves the individual of any kind of assumption that they might have. So feedback culture is really important, but also what do you require to have a feedback culture? You know, that's psychological safety. Somebody needs to feel comfortable to tell you exactly how they feel. And, you know, to get the information that's relevant, that will keep things moving towards the results that you want. Yeah.
Okay, and actually in DevOps we talk about feedback with the customer, Marion.
Absolutely. And consider, I would like to bring here a bit more of the DevOps aspects, right? So consider in terms of feedback culture, don't consider just the personal interactions, like the classic one, retrospective, or a session about knowledge exchange. Think about feedback that comes in a more indirect way from the customer, right? So that can be an information about a ticket, incident that happened in a certain way. It can be a feedback loop within the delivery cycle, right? So between build, test, and production. So what happened there? Feedback could be even the log files of what happened, right? So think about a feedback from a broader perspective, rather than one single narrow interaction every 2 weeks with a specific customer.
If I can add on that,
go on then.
Eileen, go.
Yeah. I just to add on that, because I was thinking about a client, CEO of ING Direct in Canada, and you know, some of the feedback that they would get, you know, from customers, and listening on conversations that happen in social media, for example. That's one of the things that they would get all the time, is to try to sort of understand what is the experience of the individual, even if they weren't interacting with the brand itself. That they were talking about the product was enough to try to get, you know, that kind of information. So I love where you took that conversation, Marion, about looking for things that are not specifically obviously feedback. Like I asked you, what is your feedback? Or can you give me feedback? Or what did you think about that? Or how did you feel about that? But to look for a creative way to get information that would help you refine your offering, I feel like is a really important one here.
So I mean, it's obviously, it's narrowing it down and being you're there to kind of, you know, sort of show them what, you know, the journey whilst they're developing, basically. And before, you know, we move on, but I, you know, just want to ask one question, and please, you know, do ask questions. We have a question here from Elizabeth Zalaski, which I'm going to ask now before we move to the next section. Do you confirm that if the top management is not convinced by the need added value for coaching, for example, for a product owner or an organization, for example, the deployment on UAT and production is quite impossible to change anything? Marion, do you want to answer that?
Sure. I have the classic consulting answer. It depends. So, let's go by parts, right? So that there is the first aspect, coaching. I would encourage, and I had hard times learning that, but I would like to encourage you, Elizabeth, and also other listeners, think what is possible within your area of influence, right? So being probably in your role, you can apply some practices, be it a product owner, be it a scrum master, even if you're a classic project manager or a PMO. There is some agile practice slash DevOps practice that can help you improve, and some mindset or some concrete dynamics, right? So a small workshop that will move you forward. So that's one thing. Then on the other side, if we talk about organizational level, absolutely, you need the buy-in of the management. So far, I haven't experienced a bottom-up transformation. You need both, right? So bottom-up and top-down. And I think this is why also DASA added the DASA leadership course, right? So what needs to happen on leadership level, apart from coaching level, to make the DevOps transformation successful. Then Elizabeth, to completely answer your question, for example, deployment on UAT and prod, that's something hopefully that the team has the authority to decide, right? Depends on the technical landscape. I don't think that should be a management decision. I don't know your organization, but the deployment procedure should be tackled in team level, in my opinion.
Okay, Elizabeth, I hope that answers your question. And we also have another question from, sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Karfa Kayan, Scrum at Scale, LSM. How long is a coach required? I mean, that depends on the project. I mean, Eileen, do you want to answer that question?
It really depends. You know, it really depends on what is it, you know, that they're getting coached on, and whether it's related to a certain KPI. You know, it really depends on the request. I don't know what it's, you know, when it comes to DASA and DevOps, you know, like specifically, I know I can work with a client for 12 months, or I can work for 2 years, you know, depending on the results that they're trying. It could be attached to a certain strategy that the business is going after. And so then, you know, coaching is part of, you know, that particular strategy for a certain business development strategy. It depends.
Yeah.
Right. I think you mentioned a good number, Aline. So first, the premise that a good coach would like to make themselves obsolete after a while, right? So one of our goals, and also one of the DASA principles, is autonomous teams, right, and team empowerment. So the idea is that in the shortest time possible, the teams becomes more and more independent and autonomous, and then even after 2 years, if the coach is still needed and critical for team's performance and success, then you should really ask yourselves and also the coach what's going on. There is something that needs to be changed, right, after such a long time.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the results that you expect to get, you know, by giving some examples with case studies. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But good. You're absolutely right, Marion, in saying, you know, the idea is to make the coach obsolete, so that they become, you know, empowered and doing the job, and, you know, sort of in a clearer way. But let's talk about culture and mindset. You know, obviously guiding professionals and teams on how to build the right culture and mindset for long-term success. What would you say is the right culture and mindset, Marion, for DevOps?
That's a good one. I think the right mindset and culture is the one that is value driven, coming from Scrum, that allows flow, for example. So having a continuous delivery flow coming from the principles of Lean and Kanban. And of course, allowing for experimentation, right? So if I have to pinpoint a specific mindset, that's probably the growth mindset, right? So think of experimentation. Think of failure as an opportunity to grow. What can I do differently? How do I perceive feedback? Do I like to try new things? All these are parts of the mindset and culture that we would ideally want to enable.
Hmm. And Eileen, what, in terms of your experience, in terms of building the right culture and mindset within companies, when you're training leaders, how do the leaders impact their teams to kind of work with the right
Absolutely.
culture and mindset?
In my work, it really boils down to you have to lead yourself first before you lead others. And so the mindset of taking responsibility for your own development and your own growth and just analyzing, how you're impacting, others within the team is a really, really important one. So before you ask of someone else, then ask of yourself first. Is a lot of the concepts that I work with. So leading oneself first before you lead others. From my perspective too, is also it's not about authority; it's about influence. So authority can get you the result that you want, A to B, A to Z, but influence creates a cycle of results. And so you want to inspire somebody into action, or you want to command somebody into action. And so what I've seen in my work is that when you are building a culture of trust that is based on influence, you're creating results that come from inspiration, they're long-lasting, they're sustainable. The individual feels that they're autonomous, they're respected, and they want to continue working with you. They want to continue driving the vision forward.
Okay, so when you talk about results, how do you measure results? How do you and I mean, obviously we can talk about metrics and what have you, but how do you, with performance and change, for example?
Right. Yeah.
How do you measure results?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting question that always gets asked. How do you measure, results? For my work, it's always around employee engagement. So are you having a number of people that are leaving? Are you having a number of people with conflicts all the time? Those are the results that we look for. What's the employee engagement, that we have within an organization? Retention is really important. I think it's really expensive for companies to leave their talent. So it's really important that they keep their talent. And so the less that people are quitting, that is a direct result of how things are working well within an organization.
Great, good answer. And Marion, have you got something to add to this?
Well, in terms of performance metrics, right? The how do we measure the DevOps performance? I think there has been a consensus and agreement in the community. So the DevOps organization for Research Association, short DORA, applied for metrics that I think are also accepted by DASA. They were part of the course: deployment frequency, lead time for changes, time to restore service, and change failure rate. So if you have a long list where to start, these four or one of these four is a very good start. It's been a good market practice.
Okay, and in terms of your competitors, or can you go into a bit more detail?
What do you mean by competitors?
You were talking about market practice. So can you explain that again in just a bit more detail?
I meant to say that these four metrics that I mentioned are a good practice from the market, right? So if you're wondering which metric should I apply to measure my DevOps performance, these four are a very good starting point.
Okay, good. And obviously, the understanding, there's four different key modes with coaching. Coaching, mentoring, facilitation, and consulting. How do you know when to apply these four modes? Or obviously, from you both being coaches, how do you know when to apply these four modes in practice? Eileen,
you want
do
me
you
to
want
answer,
answer?
Marion?
Yeah.
I can jump on that. Yeah. It's really interesting because I come from a consulting background, and so I really know the difference in the sense that coaching is not about advice, although everybody wants your advice. Like I think everybody's looking for you to answer a question. And the role of a coach is really to continue push it back on the individual and to really try to help them understand, their own solution. So, if you look at consulting, you provide a strategy to somebody based on your own expertise, and you give them the strategy, and you either implement it or, you have, the team is implementing. 9 times out of 10, I don't know the exact number, but 9 times out of 10, I'm not really sure that these plans are actually being implemented. But when you're coaching, you're not giving advice. You're helping the individual really look for the solution themselves, and they do. And so that's the main difference between, really just helping the other person find the solution on their own. I mean, if you think about a team and you have somebody that's coming to you all the time. They come to their manager, I've got a problem, and here's the problem, and, this is what's happening in the team, etc. And so the manager is listening to them, asking them questions, helping them to understand, to think for themselves. The person is now coming up with their own solution. They feel autonomous. They feel like confident. They feel like they've come up with something. And then they gain the trust of the leader because the leader is helping them really feel, empowered within themselves. And so that's the role of a coach. You can have a leader that says, here's the solution to the problem. Okay, that's great. You can, give them a solution right away and then move on. But the difference is really coaching allows a little bit more space for the person to build that agency, to build that know-how, to build that trust within themselves. So that's really the main difference, that I see. Mentoring is also another one, but it falls in between the two.
Mm-hmm. Maren, have you got?
Right. Well, I think that's a very valid question, and then we have a good point here by explaining or by deep diving that a coach is not always just a coach, right? You need to be able to switch between these roles, and of course that depends on the level of maturity of the team. It depends if you're looking to solve a problem or guide a team to a solution, and it can typically start from a more teaching perspective rather than coaching, right? So more of in the beginning, I typically would start with a few trainings, with a few workshops, where I'm more of a mentor, more of a trainer, and as the curiosity and the maturity grows, I can switch to more of a coaching mode, right? And then sometimes there are very specific situations where specifically a consultant is required. So you enter, you observe, and you recommend, right? So as a consultant, I think that's for me in my own words, the main difference. So the coach will guide you with questions to discover the range of solutions, and the consultant sometimes is expected to recommend a certain solution, to explain the impact, and sometimes even to deliver it, right? And it's a key to prepare what is expected from you, right? So if you enter in a meeting where you're expected to deliver a solution and you start guiding by questions, that can be very frustrating for the participants.
Okay. And obviously, we're talking about high performance teams. Martin, who is a regular on these webinars, Martin Gross, how would you define what is high performance in teams? And we can talk about leaders too.
Right. I would say teams, and again, I'm not quoting the DASA training material in my own words. That's a team that is able to satisfy the customer needs by delivering fast the value that is expected, and in the in the right team setup, meaning we have the right profiles, the right expertise in the team, and also with the right mindset, right? So on the content side, on the collaboration side, not on the content.
Okay, and Eileen, can you sort of talk about leaders in this area? How
So
do
in
you
terms of
measure high
high
performance?
performance, it's trust. So in my work, it's about, if you're a high performer, that means that you're really gaining the trust of people to move the vision forward. So if the vision is moving forward, that means that you're really having the trust of individuals, to move it, together. That's what I would say.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I have to sneeze. I'm really sorry.
Don't worry about it. Okay, so now we just want to just give some examples of, case studies. For example, both of you have worked within teams and leadership. Let's talk about a real life example of what works and what doesn't in coaching teams and leaders. So Marion, you first. Give some examples of what you feel works and what doesn't work in coaching teams.
All right. Starting from the past, a big insurance company I've worked with, we were doing the agile / DevOps transformation back in the days, and I was in the coaching team. There, the pain point, in my own words, was the services were too waterfall, right? So rigid planning, rigid processes, slow delivery, sometimes increased costs, right? So what worked for us? What worked for our coaching team back then? The first point is, and I started my journey there, is surround yourself with experts and other coaches, right? So create a powerful team where you have all the expertise to deliver, and then go step by step in this unexplored field, what is called agile transformation. If you don't have yet a blueprint, a proper guidance, iterate, right? So in a true agile style, look for short cycles and improve after each one. What's a no-go? We didn't manage to bring middle management on board quite, so just partially. And I personally underestimated resistance from managers and teams outside of mine, right? So these strong teams of experts and coaches made me more focused on what we deliver and not always on how we deliver it. So don't forget the aspect of organizational change management. That's something that doesn't work, and I learned it the hard way.
Okay, so why doesn't tell me just a little bit more detail. Why doesn't it work?
Well, you cannot jump directly. So there is a very nice lean principle: start where you are, right? So we cannot start a greenfield in most companies. Most companies are established, and these companies growth in a certain way with certain structure and processes, and you can't just ignore them. You need to consider them in your transformation, and the key aspect of that are people, right? And very often managers are the one both with the responsibility to deliver and also with the responsibility to design, create, and maintain the structure and processes. So in the end of the day, as simple as that, better have them on board. This will facilitate your coaching and your transformation.
Okay, good answer. And Eileen, with obviously your experience with coaching, leaders, what works and what doesn't? What are the challenges you see with leaders? What's been your biggest learning from coaching leaders?
Sure. I mean, there are the leaders that have been told to get coaching, and then leaders that want coaching. And so there's a big difference in the results, between the two, or certainly the cadence in which transformation begins. And so I think, that's a very interesting place to start. And then what I've seen in my work is that it does take a lot longer when an individual is being told by HR that they need to get coaching. So that I find, is a big difference in what works and what doesn't. I can also tell you, I facilitate, inclusion and diversity conversations, especially around microaggression, conversations. And so when you bring a team together to talk about inclusion and diversity, in the context of microaggression, I think it's fantastic, when companies do that. And so I come in as a coach, and if the individual person is not coached individually, and then they're being asked to come together, that also can create some roadblocks. So what does work is a program where an individual person is being coached separately before they bring them in onto the team. So that's what I find with team coaching is the idea that the individual must be coached first before they come in and talk about something together. And then for the individual leader, there really is a difference. So you really want to work in HR or within the organization on trying to help coach your way through getting the leader to really see this as an opportunity for themselves to get coached. So that's what I would say.
And then what would you?
I hope that answers.
Yes. What would you say in terms of like the leader coaching the leader, but also transmitting that to his team, in terms of how does that, because obviously that's quite a challenge in itself.
That is absolutely a challenge. And I think that before a leader asks their team to get coached, them getting coached is a really big step in inspiring that kind of behavior, within an organization. So it really is a top-down, change within a culture and within an organization. So I found that when the CEO and the C-suite is admittingly talk about coaching and really making that really possible within an organization and actually building strategies and putting a mandate together with HR, departments on making coaching part of the culture, then that becomes a lot more receptive, within leaders themselves to raise their hand and say, I actually could benefit from doing that. Or at least that when you introduce the concept of coaching teams and you bring them together, there isn't really a lot of resistance. So if mid-level, manager is understanding that the CEO is getting coaching, that really helps things move along better.
Okay. So, the overall aspect, of coaching within organizations, is obviously to providing a mirror for each one of them to work on behavior and sort of how they're producing, how it's affecting their work, and so just give a sort of overall insight of why coaching is sort of so important.
Yeah, so you're asking me, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. I think I touched on a little bit earlier, with just that example of, first of all, you really want to understand that, let's say in the case of DESA, where you're trying to get really like customer centric, and you're looking at the end game, you're really trying to think about that. You're really trying to think about how do you keep things moving, without a lot of friction. And so really building a culture, that helps, teams feel autonomous, really moves things along. But how do you do that? You do that by coaching the individual. You do that by coaching the team. You do that by creating, conversation within teams that really help, support what needs to get done. You're removing the friction as you are supporting each individual. This idea of mirroring, reflecting, hearing the person, listening to the person, having empathy for the person, being curious about the person. This is really important work that makes the person receiving that feel like they can be a lot more autonomous, that they feel that, they have a little bit more freedom to speak up, that they feel like they, that whole concept of psychological safety that, people are talking about these days is there for them, to think about, various ways of being within the organization. So it really affects the bottom line of a business, the idea of coaching, because you're empowering the individual.
Great. Okay. Great, Eileen. So, I mean, I just wanted a sort of overview of kind of like, in terms of both of you, obviously we talked about the importance of coaching, but, sort of, to make people think about, coaching teams and leaders and especially when they're scaling up the business, how important it is to sort of not lose track of the individual during that process. And obviously the leader having to manage a team while scaling the business, is quite a challenge. And, Marion, you can sort of talk about the sort of, coaching teams while scaling the business. That is quite a challenge in itself.
It is, but I agree with everything you said, but I didn't get a question. Sorry. Can you rephrase, please?
During the scaling up of the business, obviously there are
Right.
challenges, so it is important to be able to coach the individual during that process.
Yes. Right. All right. So I guess the question is more of where to start, what to consider, right?
Yes.
All right. First off, about scaling, there is a really good webinar that a colleague of mine, Luca Injani, gave with us a few weeks ago. Given the time left, I would recommend checking that. But still, to answer the question, consider before scaling, consider the purpose of why, and also consider what kind of pilot you want to start with. And also consider that the two of the principles are quite revolutionary when we talk about scaling. That's end-to-end responsibility in the team, and also cross-functional autonomous teams. This means this can mean serious reshuffling of roles and responsibilities. So have that in mind, right? Then map the context. Assemble the cross-functional team. It's a key that it's a cross-functional one to be able to deliver good DevOps results. And then don't forget to reflect, adapt, and learn, right? And in terms of scaling frameworks, don't fall in love with just one, right? See what works for you. If you're not sure what works for you best, get some guidance, get some expertise from outside the team or outside the company. But don't automatically implement a framework just because it's popular and there is someone that told you that that works best, right?
Okay, great, good answer. We're almost running out of time. And Eileen, anything to add to that, or we just?
No, yeah, I think if there's more questions, let's leave the time for that, maybe.
Wonderful. Okay, so in the end, scaling is about descaling. Dimitri has commented. And also, Jermaine, thank you very much for your feedback regarding the DevOps subject. Okay, you've answered that, Marion. And any other questions we have? We're almost out of time, but we're getting some positive feedback here. I think, yeah, so any other questions, please do get in touch with us at, you can find out more information about the DASA organization at DevOpsAgileSkills.org. Sorry, my mind is like so busy with information that I'm forgetting the website. But yes, DevOpsAgileSkills.org if you want to find out more about the coaching training. And Eileen, thank you very much for joining us today and also contributing to this very important topic. Both of you have been very helpful and much appreciated, and look forward to hearing more in the coaching community on the importance of coaching high performance teams. So thank you both for joining us today, and thank you everybody for being part of this webinar and also asking some questions. That was great. So see you again. We'll be doing more webinars, including one next Thursday with enterprise leaderships on basically bringing DevOps, bringing value to scaling up during DevOps processes. So thank you very much for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you again.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Take care.
Thank
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.